It seems like everyone's always searching for something, like trying to figure out what it all means and how to live a truly great life.
Yeah, that search for meaning. It's a pretty universal thing, isn't it?
Totally. And today, we're going to take a deep dive into one really unique perspective on that very search. A listener sent us chapter 67 called Power of Love from something called the Built for God movement.
BFG, okay.
And they described it as like the Christian edition of the Tao Te Ching.
So what's this chapter all about?
It's not just presenting another viewpoint, it's really trying to offer an expression of God's love. And their goal is to restore the truth.
A pretty ambitious goal, for sure. And they have this framework they call the Trinitarian method, or MAP mindset, aim, practice, which is all about personal renewal.
Right. This MAP thing seems to be key to how they approach everything. So for this deep dive, we're going to try to really get to the heart of this chapter, understand their take on love, moderation, and humility.
Sounds good. We can explore how they see those concepts in action through this MAP lens, and also see if there are any unexpected connections with other spiritual traditions.
Exactly. I'm curious to see what we find. So right off the bat, the chapter talks about God's greatness in a kind of different way.
How so?
It starts by saying, the whole world says God is great, as if he is beyond compare. Okay, makes sense so far. But then it says, because of God's greatness, he seems beyond compare. If God can be compared, he would have been forgotten long ago.
So they're saying that God's greatness is so vast, so far beyond our ability to grasp, that it almost defies comparison.
Yeah, like it's so huge that if we could actually compare him to anything, it would diminish his essence.
Makes you think about the nature of the divine, doesn't it? What's beyond our human understanding.
For sure. And they actually provide some scriptural references to back this up. Like in Job 36, it talks about God's power being beyond our grasp, unsearchable.
And Psalm 113, it praises God as being exalted above all creation. He transcends everything we know.
Right. So there's this clear emphasis on God being supreme, totally unmatched. It's like the starting point for their whole worldview.
So within this BFG framework, how does this idea, this belief in God's incomparable greatness actually shape our mindset? How are we supposed to approach life differently because of it?
Well, they say that recognizing God's unmatched greatness should fill us with this profound sense of awe, like genuine reverence. And it makes sense when you think about it. If God is that much greater than anything we can imagine, wouldn't it inspire a certain amount of awe?
Yeah, I can see that. So then where does the aim come in? What are we actually striving for in light of that mindset?
Okay, so the chapter suggests a really interesting shift. It says that instead of being preoccupied with seeking validation from others, like always wanting approval or recognition, we should be aiming to acknowledge and honor God's greatness in everything we do.
So it's not about seeking human approval, but orienting ourselves towards something much, much larger.
Yeah, it's about shifting our focus to something beyond ourselves, to something truly transcendent.
That's pretty profound when you think about it. But how do we actually put that into practice? What does the chapter suggest for day-to-day living?
Well, when it comes to practice, they say we should start each day by consciously acknowledging God's greatness.
Okay, so like a daily reminder of this fundamental truth.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. They also emphasize reflecting his glory in our choices, in the decisions we make and the things we do throughout the day. It's like living with this constant awareness that there's this supreme being at the center of it all.
Interesting. It's like a constant grounding in something bigger than ourselves. It reminds me of how other spiritual traditions also talk about an ultimate reality beyond our comprehension.
In Islam, Allah is the greatest is a fundamental statement of faith. It's a powerful expression of reverence beyond comparison.
Right. And in Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita describes the Supreme as being beyond qualities. Like, our human categories don't apply, so we can't even fully grasp it.
And in Buddhism, the Buddha's wisdom is often described as being incomparable. It's the ultimate source of enlightenment, something beyond our ordinary understanding.
It's pretty wild, isn't it? All these different traditions from all over the world pointing to this concept of something greater than ourselves.
Is this reverence for something beyond our comprehension a fundamental part of the human experience? Could it be hinting at a shared truth that resonates across cultures and religions?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure. So we've got this foundation, right? God's unmatched greatness, according to the BFG movement. But then the chapter goes on to introduce these three treasures.
Yeah, what are those all about? And how do they connect back to this idea of God's supreme nature?
Well, these three treasures are love, moderation, and humility. And the chapter presents them as core virtues, like essential qualities for personal and spiritual growth. And they emphasize that we should hold these virtues dear, protect them, and never let them go.
It's interesting how they frame them as treasures, something precious and valuable.
Definitely. It implies they're worth striving for, worth cultivating within ourselves.
And as they do with many things, they link these treasures back to familiar Christian scriptures. Like love is connected to that beautiful passage in 1 Corinthians 13.
You know, the one that talks about love being patient, kind, not envious, not boastful, and all that. It's a pretty powerful definition of love.
Yeah, a classic. And these qualities like kindness, gentleness, self-control, those are also echoed in the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians.
And humility is a big theme in Colossians, like putting on compassion, humility, gentleness, those kinds of things.
So it's clear they're drawing on traditional Christian teachings. But what's the mindset here? How should we be thinking about these three treasures?
Well, the chapter really stresses that we should be consciously cultivating these virtues, like actively working to develop love, moderation, and humility in every part of our lives. They seem to contrast these virtues with what they see as the prevailing trends in the world, selfishness, overindulgence, pride.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like they see these treasures as antidotes to some of the negative tendencies they observe in society.
Exactly. So it's about actively choosing a different path, a path rooted in these core values.
Okay, so that's the mindset. Then what about the aim? What's the ultimate goal in developing these treasures?
Well, the aim is to let these virtues actually guide us, to let love, moderation, and humility shape our interactions, our decisions, really our whole approach to life.
So generosity, but within reasonable limits. Ambition, but grounded in a sense of humility.
Exactly. It's all about balance. And it's interesting how they're consistently using this MAP framework, how we should think, what we should strive for, and then how we put it all into action.
Okay, so we've talked about the mindset and the aim.
Yeah.
Now let's get practical. What about the practice? How do we actually cultivate these treasures in a tangible way?
All right, let's break it down. So for love, it's about nurturing a deep love for God first and foremost, then extending that love outwards to others.
Okay, makes sense. Love God, love others. Pretty core Christian concept. But what about moderation? How do they suggest we practice that?
They talk about living a balanced life, avoiding extremes. It's about finding a healthy middle ground in all things, not going overboard in any one direction.
Makes sense. So not indulging too much, but also not depriving ourselves unnecessarily. It's about finding that sweet spot. What about humility? How do we practice that one?
For humility, they say it's all about recognizing our dependence on God, acknowledging that any good we have ultimately comes from Him. It's about letting go of that ego, that need to take credit or seek recognition for ourselves.
So it's less about self-promotion and more about acknowledging a greater power working through us.
Exactly. And, it's really fascinating to see how these three virtues, these treasures, actually pop up in so many different spiritual and philosophical traditions.
You're right. Like love is a central theme in Jesus' teachings, of course. But it's also emphasized in the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, and Buddha's concept of loving kindness. It's like a universal principle.
And moderation. It's all about balance, right? We see it in Philippians where it says, let your moderation be known unto all men. The Quran warns against extravagance and wastefulness.
And the Bhagavad Gita talks about finding equilibrium. And the Buddhist middle way is all about avoiding extremes.
And then humility. It's praised in Matthew, in the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, and Buddhism uses this beautiful image of the lotus flower rising from muddy water as a metaphor for humility and enlightenment.
That's like these are fundamental values for being a good human, no matter what your background is.
I think you're onto something. It makes you wonder if these shared values point to something deeper, something inherent in human nature, like maybe a universal ethical framework that goes beyond specific cultures or religions.
Right. It's a really interesting thought. But the chapter doesn't just talk about the benefits of these treasures. It actually warns about what can happen if we neglect them.
Oh yeah, there are some pretty serious consequences outlined. It's not sugarcoated at all.
So they say that being fearless without love, generous without moderation, or ambitious without humility, well, it'll surely lead to death.
Whoa, that sounds intense. Are they talking about literal death here?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's more like a spiritual or relational death, a kind of downfall. They're saying that without these virtues, we're not really living a full or meaningful life.
I see. So it's like a loss of something essential, a disconnect from our true purpose.
Exactly. And they even bring in that powerful proverb, there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death.
Proverbs 14.12. That's a heavy one. It's like a reminder that good intentions aren't enough. We have to be wise and balanced in how we live out our values.
Right. So based on that, what mindset are they encouraging us to adopt? What's the key takeaway from these warnings?
Well, the big thing is understanding how interconnected these virtues are. Like, you can't just focus on one and neglect the others. If you're courageous but lack love, your actions can be harmful. If you're generous but have no moderation, you might end up depleting yourself. And if you're ambitious without humility, it can lead to arrogance and a disconnect from others.
Right. It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into each of these treasures a bit deeper. The chapter makes this really powerful statement about love.
Yeah, it says, use love when engaging in battle and all will be conquered, and our defense will be secured. Love is the means by which the heavens protect and save.
Wow. That's not just saying love is nice or important. It's presenting it as this huge strategic force.
Totally. It's elevating love beyond just an emotion. They're making it like a weapon, but one that conquers through something other than brute force.
It reminds me of Romans 8, which talks about how nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from the love of God. It's like this invincible force.
Yeah, it's about a different kind of victory, one that's not about worldly power, but about a deeper transformation.
So they're contrasting the typical idea of winning, like through aggression or dominance, with the kind of triumph that comes through Christ's love.
Right. It's a victory achieved through sacrifice, compassion, and unwavering commitment. So what kind of mindset does that call for?
Well, according to this BFG perspective, we should be looking to God's love as the source of our strength and courage. It's like grounding ourselves in something much bigger than ourselves when we face challenges.
Makes sense. It's like saying that true confidence and resilience comes from knowing we're loved unconditionally by a higher power.
Exactly. So the aim becomes living with that boldness, trusting in the power of that love to help us overcome whatever obstacles we encounter.
So we're not just talking about warm, fuzzy feelings here. This is about real, practical application of love in the face of adversity.
Right. It's about finding the courage to act, even when things are tough, because we're rooted in something bigger than ourselves. But how do we actually do that? What does the practice look like?
They say it involves intentionally rooting our courage in God's love, like making a conscious choice to let that love replace anxiety and fear.
So it's an active process, not just hoping for the best. We have to actively cultivate this connection to a higher power.
Yeah, and we see similar ideas across other faiths too, like the idea of fearlessness rooted in love is in 1 John. In the Quran, there's a sense of security in knowing that God has a plan.
And the Bhagavad Gita talks about overcoming fear through spiritual wisdom, and Buddhists practice detachment to overcome fear and anxiety.
It's fascinating to see those parallels. So many traditions recognizing the power of something greater to help us overcome fear. Okay, let's move on to another fascinating connection the chapter makes. The link between moderation and generosity.
Yeah, I was intrigued by that one. How do they connect those two?
The chapter says, knowing moderation, one becomes generous.
Okay, so what kind of mindset leads to generosity, according to this chapter?
They say it's about contentment and balance. When we're not driven by an insatiable desire for more, when we find satisfaction in what we have, we naturally become more willing to share.
If we're always striving for more, we're never truly satisfied, and we're less likely to give freely.
Exactly. So the aim becomes practicing a generosity that comes from a place of inner peace, not from a sense of lack or obligation.
So giving without feeling depleted ourselves. It's about creating a sustainable flow of generosity.
Exactly. And the practice they suggest involves giving wisely and ensuring our own needs are met while also helping others. It's about finding that balance.
And of course, generosity is a central theme in many faiths. Luke's gospel says, give and it will be given to you. The Quran encourages spending in the way of God.
In the Bhagavad Gita, selfless giving is praised, and generosity is considered a paramount virtue in Buddhism. It's fascinating how these seemingly different traditions all emphasize the importance of giving.
It speaks to something deeply human, doesn't it? That desire to share what we have and contribute to the well-being of others. All right, the last treasure we need to unpack is humility.
Yes, humility. This one is often misunderstood.
Totally. In a world that often celebrates self-promotion, it can feel counterintuitive. But the chapter makes this interesting statement. Knowing humility, one gets ahead.
I know, it sounds kind of backwards, doesn't it? Like, how does being humble help you get ahead?
Right. It challenges the typical go-getter mentality. So how does the BFG movement explain this?
They're talking about a different kind of getting ahead, a spiritual kind. The mindset here is about developing what they call a servant heart.
So seeing true greatness in serving others, not in elevating ourselves.
Precisely. And the aim becomes leading and interacting with others from a place of humility, putting their needs before our own ego.
It's about prioritizing service over self-promotion, which is definitely a different way of thinking about success. So how do we actually put this into practice?
They suggest consciously deflecting praise, seeking out opportunities to serve others, and extending grace and understanding, even when it's difficult.
So it's about letting go of that need for recognition, actively looking for ways to help, and treating others with compassion.
Exactly. And that's where true advancement comes from, according to this chapter. Not from pushing ourselves forward, but from humbling ourselves before God.
And we see echoes of this in Scripture too, like in Luke 14 and 1 Peter, where it talks about humility leading to exaltation. And the response section connects it to similar ideas in Matthew, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, and Buddhism.
It's like this universal truth across so many traditions. Real strength and influence comes not from demanding respect, but from earning it through humility and service.
Powerful stuff. Now, towards the end of the chapter, it circles back to the power of love, but this time in the context of dealing with difficulties and conflicts.
Yeah, they emphasize that love is the ultimate weapon in any spiritual battle, the key to overcoming challenges and finding peace.
So what mindset do they encourage us to cultivate when we're facing those kinds of situations?
They say we should approach every situation, even conflicts, with love and compassion at the forefront. It's about always seeking understanding and aiming for reconciliation.
So even when we disagree with someone, even when they've hurt us, the goal is to approach them with love. That sounds incredibly difficult.
It's definitely challenging, but that's the ideal they're putting forward. So the aim is to let love be the guiding principle in any disagreement or conflict we encounter.
And what does that look like in practice?
It's about consciously choosing love and forgiveness over retaliation or resentment. It's about letting go of that urge to get even and instead seeking healing and restoration.
It's choosing to respond differently, to break the cycle of negativity. It's definitely not easy.
But they're drawing on some really deep Christian teachings here, like in Matthew, where Jesus says to love your enemies, and in Romans, where it says to overcome evil with good.
Right, those are pretty radical ideas. But I guess that's the point. It's about transforming our approach to conflict and finding a more loving and peaceful way forward.
And potentially transforming ourselves in the process. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Chapter 67, Power of Love, from the Built for God movement, what are your big takeaways?
Well, for me, the chapter really highlights love as like the ultimate virtue. You know, it's not just a feeling, but a powerful force that can change things.
I agree. And they show how moderation plays this crucial role in enabling true generosity. And then there's humility, which is like this unexpected path to real spiritual growth and influence.
And it's all rooted in this deep reverence for God's greatness, this idea that there's something much bigger than us at play.
Exactly. They're not just presenting these treasures as abstract ideas, they're giving us a practical roadmap for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life. It's like an invitation to align ourselves with something larger than ourselves and tap into this deeper power.
It's all about making conscious choices and letting these virtues guide our thoughts, actions, and how we treat others. So, to our listener, as you reflect on what we've discussed, which of these three treasures, love, moderation, or humility, really stands out to you right now?
Yeah, which one resonates most deeply? And how might intentionally focusing on cultivating that virtue further shape your perspective and your actions going forward?
It's worth taking some time to consider how these qualities are all interconnected, like how growth in one area can actually support growth in the others.
And remember that final thought in the source material. Truth cannot contradict truth. It's a quote from St. Thomas Aquinas. And it's suggesting that there might be deeper connections between this Christian perspective and the wisdom found in other spiritual traditions.
We've seen a lot of those connections during our deep dive. It's like there's this common thread running through all of them, pointing to some universal truths about the human experience.
It's a fascinating thing to contemplate, and it makes you think about how these ancient principles might actually offer some pretty relevant insights for navigating the challenges we face today.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a really thought-provoking exploration.
Until next time.
See you then.